There are a lot more audits now than there have been now that states are looking for money. Everybody over a certain income amount, I can be sure that anyone who's making over $1 million that's changed from filing a resident return in a jurisdiction, especially in New York, and begins to either not file at all or file a non-resident return, it's almost a guaranteed invitation to be audited. You really need to be prepared for your audit and establish credibility as you go along. And despite what the audit guidelines say, no auditor should or will accept simply your word for where you were on a specific day. The burden of proof is going to be on the taxpayer, and the burden of proof is clear and convincing evidence. What does that mean? That means evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that a reasonable person would consider truthful. So that's a pretty high standard that you're going to need to meet for your audit. If you remember from our past videos, there are two ways to be a resident of New York State and most states in the tri-state area. You could either be a domiciliary or you can be a statutory residence. Now, one important component to both of those tests is a time element. You're going to need to establish where you were and what you were doing. It's not the typical information that you hear at your country club. You change your driver's license, you change your voting address, you do a declaration of domicile in Florida. That's all self-serving, and that's simply not going to be enough to prove a change of residence and establish your residency outside of your previous state of residence. The most important thing that you can do is to keep a contemporaneous calendar. That is crucial. That is the first thing that any auditor is going to look at, and that should be your go-to document. Now, what do you have to have along with that contemporaneous calendar? As much third-party documentation as you can have. That would include credit card receipts, ATMs, country club statements, all of those things that show where you were on a particular day. You also need to be very, very careful as to negative indicators of where you might be. We all try to be very generous, lend people our homes, our houses, but often what will happen is phone calls will show up on days you were not at a particular location, and it was a guest that might have used the phone. Your E-ZPass records will be subpoenaed by New York if you don't provide them to them, and you'll see toll charges in and out of New York. You might have lent your car to a friend, to a child, and these are all negative indicators that you need to be aware that are going to come back to haunt you, especially 3 years from now. Now, keeping these records might seem like common sense, but you'd be surprised how often it doesn't happen. As a result, what can happen is you could lose an audit by 1 or 2 days, just be right over the day count. You could not be able to establish a pattern of life that you have because you couldn't show where you are. You can also run up a lot of stress in your life trying to put these records together 3 or 4 years later. You could also run up lots and lots of professional time trying to have somebody assist you to do this. Burden has a lot of experience dealing with life changes and helping people make these changes. So you should speak to your Burden advisor. We'll help you plan this out now so there'll be no surprises when the audit comes around.